audience and also present part of the solution. And Jim Novak CloudKnox will be presenting. So I just wanted to open up the floor. We got Melissa Krenek, Liam McLean, Jim, and Ashley joining us. And we'll have a few rounds of black hat conversation. And Leah, it was your idea. Maybe you start off with that. You
Sure. I think when we look at Black Hat, was virtual this year, as everything has been. So hopefully you all got to at least take advantage of catching a lot of the discussions. I know there's been a lot around, obviously, the ways security has changed or evolved, or measures that have been approached given COVID and work remote. And so some interesting discussions around that from the keynotes, as well as elections coming up.
Elections. I thought it will be around pandemic and the COVID-19 response and all that would be very scripted, but seems like the entire, the main stage was captured primarily by election security, right? Very, very important topic, right?
Yeah, it was. I think it'll be interesting to see we're a couple months away now from all of that, what that looks like. And, I think the measures in general, if you look at everything online and that first threat attack vector, with everyone being online now. So it should be interesting to hear from others as well, what they've been seeing. And, I think I hear community quite often from many of your vendors out there, and what even efforts that Cloud Security Alliance is leading, that there's a lot to still solve, and we need a community approach in terms of coming together on what does that look like to help businesses and customers and organizations to stay as safe as they can with the new normal.
Yeah. So Leah, can you bring up some of the topics that that was captured in the recap? Maybe we start with that and then go around.
Sure. So I think if we take a look at, the keynote, it was Hacking Public Opinion, right? That was the one by Renee. She's a research manager at Stanford Internet Observatory, and her whole track was around the steady growth and maturing of damaging social media campaigns by nation states, and more or less around the threat actors that are fine-tuning those attacks. And I think not just though in the light of the campaign, but in general, the threat, the attacks with online. And there's just so much more that people are susceptible to now, with many businesses moving online, even their business as a whole, because of the pandemic. And what that looks like for protection, or even if for that matter, potential cloud adoption, and then security with the cloud adoption.
No, I think the Stanford Observatory, Internet Observatory, has been very active in this space. Yesterday, I was on a program with Alex Stamos, and he outlined the entire the research that has been done, and it seems like there are platform plays. So there are certain platforms. The platforms are trying to do something. Social media platforms are trying to do something, and then the observers are trying to report on that. But the distinction between the two is so hard, right? I mean, what's coming from a real political angle, which is absolutely fine, and that's how the democracy is built about. But to shift it from the ones where you really don't have any control on who's actually posting, is it a bot posting, and then they're moving forward. So and the way the social media platforms are managed, like Twitter and Facebook are managed quite differently. And then there is a host of others. I mean, even in YouTube, I think that recommendation engines are quite different. In Twitter and Facebook, it's more policy oriented, so there are monitors. But if you go to other platforms, they are not as closely done. So I think that the technology platforms have completely gotten hold of somehow the whole. I would say that the conversation that would be neutral or natural or organic.
Yes, agree. And I think another big topic was ransomware. I think that's more and more prevalent now too, especially all the ransomware that we've seen with healthcare as well. So that was a big one as well at Black Hat. And I mean, it's not going away anytime soon. There's a lot of discussion around the various strategies to almost assume as if ransomware will happen. Are you prepared today?
Yeah, right. I think that there are at least 5 or 6 ransomware related topical discussions. There was one where I attended was about the preparation. I think majority was about reaction, right? When you get, what do you do? Incident response. But preparation towards incident response is the one that could be highlighted more probably in future forums, not just Black Hat. But I think the ransomware situation has not dissipated. It is actually gone even wilder now. It seems like there are sleeper cells that have been awakened, and large or small organizations have to go deal with it in their own ways. But there is no single way of actually getting them getting to address this, right? So everybody's trying to do their own thing.
Mm-hmm. And then another big one was also multi-cloud. A lot of tracks on multi-cloud security, and around as we move between clouds, what are some of the patterns and security flaws that potentially opens up, and the most, a lot of the common cloud misconfigurations that organizations make today, which probably leads in even a little bit to what our guests here from CloudKnox will be talking through as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking forward to that. I wanted to open the floor up to anyone from the audience anybody want to talk about their experiences, or in general speak about cloud security. You can just type up your name. Maybe that's how we identify you and get you pulled into this room.
Val, it seems like someone named Raj might want to participate.
Okay. Let me. Hi, Raj.
Hey, I just sent a message about I just joined, and I have a hard stop. That's the main thing. So I didn't participate in Black Hat, but can I ask a question? Or?
Sure, please do. Yeah.
So with this change in dynamics, right, like the load and everything with the people working from various places. So have they talked any perspective on those type of scenarios? The load on the system, and what type of any changes in the way they look at the security for the cloud?
So I think in general there is a lot of load on the system and infrastructure in any given day now, considering that everybody's working remotely. There's a network stress testing going on. In fact, in every neighborhood, I would tell, right? The neighborhoods were meant for I would say domestic internet usage, and now there is commercial work going on around probably the community. So I don't think there has been it's a very good question. I think if you talk about the availability of infrastructure and network, I don't think there has been any discussion anywhere. There has been a lot of discussion around the security aspect of it, and
that's what I'm asking. Security side.
yeah, so I believe there is a ton of discussion going on, and within Black Hat, outside, if you look at the recaps that they had in their YouTube channel, I think they have posted quite a few. But in general, if you just look up the programming that CSA has been doing, we have been doing at CFF, and all the other channels, major discussion forums, all of them have had a very significant discussion around the security load. And the two that we believe came up consistently over the last few months of discussion, one was that, how can you address the connectivity problem, securely connecting end devices to the corporate network and the assets, and you can splice it up further. The connecting from your devices, bring your own device policy. If you say those who had that, they have been able to scale up a little bit faster than others. And there are the extreme cases, and I think which is probably a majority now, is that people have brought in their own devices. Earlier, when there was an always on VPN, now that has been extended over to this whole wide array of people. I would say employees and contractors and whoever is engaged, officially or formally within a business, they have to now connect over VPN. So those that are always on VPN, to scale up from a 20%, 25% capacity to almost 80-90% capacity has been a big issue. And the first few weeks were in fact handling that. And when I say first few weeks, I would say kind of mid-March to almost end of April, for 2 to 6 weeks was addressing that. And then now what the issue that we are seeing has transitioned to is kind of phase return to workplace. I mean, everybody's at work, so I don't think return to work makes sense, but return to workplace definitely. A lot of the organizations, as you have probably seen, have extended their work from home or remote work policies to be beyond 2020 and well into 2021, and some of the extent of actually making it permanent, so you can work remotely as long as you want to. So I think the security considerations right now are about return to workplace and how can you trust the devices that are coming back. And that was a consideration discussion both in Black Hat, and is an ongoing discussion how to bring devices, corporate or BYOD, back into the corporate enterprise, right? When people return to the workplace.
Yeah, thank you. Luckily, I upgraded my network here to the AT&T fiber. Bandwidth is not an issue at this point, at least in my neighborhood in Plano.
Good for you. Yeah, I think that's essential now that you have many of us have kids going
to
it's
a 4 offices going on at home at this point.
Exactly. And this morning itself, we saw there were outages in school district internet areas, and there was primarily infrastructure. I don't know if there's anything to do with security, but at least there were infrastructure issues, and kids getting online and finishing up their work was a challenge, which is not surprising.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Raj. Good to have you back.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have another question from Sandhya on the online here, and she's asking about container security and DevSecOps. And coincidentally, we had a program just 2 weeks back with on the CFF live channel about DevSecOps and product security. I don't know specifically. You have. Maybe I unmute you, Sandhya. I can ask this question yourself exactly what you want us to address, because this could be so many things to think about.
Hi, this is Sandhya. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome, Sandhya.
Yeah, I just feel like container security is still a nascent field. Do you see, which players are emerging as the leaders? Do you see more DevSecOps managed service providers or companies building that specialty in-house? So just more of a general, I'd love to hear your outlook on the industry. And if you could send me the link to the previous webinar you had, that would be great.
Sure, absolutely will do. I think very relevant question. Again, keeping it in the context of Black Hat, I think there are some discussions, but I think in a general sense of where container security is going and integrating with DevSecOps, I think we are seeing a lot of uptick in DevSecOps as a, or I would say an evolution of DevSecOps as a mature practice. Most of the organizations that, whether CSA members or Cloud Security Alliance members or Cyber Future Foundation members or in our day jobs, we are seeing there's a hybrid model, especially with larger organizations which have established, plays in product and application security. DevSecOps has become relatively more mature, but with respect to the container security, I think I don't think I should probably allude to any providers, specific service providers, no affiliation here. But in general, that product stack and the technology stack is on a maturity curve. It's not probably where everybody can take advantage of that. There are still in large organizations that we are associated with, one or the other in our professional life, we are seeing they are still in a what you can say incubator mode. There are pilot programs happening, and that specifically container security. But for DevSecOps, I think it has entered mainstream. Over the last 3 to 5 years, we have seen a continued increase in actually democratizing security and integrating the developer community within the security framework, and the whole left shift of security by design has become, I believe, much better than what it used to be. So we are not there where we would want to be, but I think we are definitely on that journey. From our discussions with the industry practitioners who have been involved in CSA or CFF, what we have observed is that most of them have retained their traditional job of being product or application security directors, and they have their entire program portfolio under them. They have vulnerability management and a whole host of security programs that are traditionally, people follow. But from a security program standpoint and organizational rollout, this is still to be adopted in a larger scale. It will probably remain hybrid for at least some time to come.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sandhya.
Yeah, to that point, Val, the another big area of discussion at Black Hat was looking at the organizations who know that they need to adopt more security in their software development for productivity as they move towards DevSecOps. And then as part of that came a lot of the training that and skill sets that need to evolve around that area. That was another big discussion at Black Hat as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely a tracking topic, and I think it will continue to be towards. I think there was, you mentioned about the cloud security topics, which have been, our area of interest for quite some time. In fact, CSA always had a good presence at Black Hat, and I think it's not a outlier anymore. It's cloud security and overall cloud services are just pretty much mainstream now. I mean, people actually think about and talk about on-prem solutions and technologies as if they are something novel, okay? And they have become the outliers. So interestingly, there has been a huge uptick in one area, and this is another topic that I will share with you, our last webinar around passwordless security, which is expanding the multi-factor authentication and the identity, realizing the identity perimeter, ensuring that we have solutions which have not only authentication in terms of not only authentication in terms of the two-factor, but also a pretty fine-grained authorization built into API levels, so that the automated interactions between the different levels of solutioning and organizational infrastructure that uses SaaS and security software as a service as well as infrastructure as a service can talk to each other. I think that was a pretty good development. So Passwordless security was big. The other one that was big was zero trust. And I think zero trust, we did a session, in fact, last week with the former CISO of Google, Gerhard Eschelbach, on zero trust. And it was about demystifying zero trust because it has become such a huge buzzword, right? I don't know what our friend Jim is going to share on his zero trust journey for the product and the service, but I would not be surprised to see zero trust leveled in every security product, just because the way it's going. And I don't think it's a hype. That's another thing that we emphasized last week's conversation, was that if you look at the zero trust concept, in fact, right now it's more relevant than ever, because we have got endpoints that are connecting from outside in, and you don't have, like, earlier we did, or even we do it now, I think, in a significant portion of the endpoints have golden images that are installed, and then those are the golden images that you work against, and your protection and mechanisms, your policies, everything is built around that golden image of your endpoint. But when you have 3, 4, 5-fold increase in the usage of endpoints that are not corporate kind of ratified or don't carry that golden image, then you also carry you absolutely carry the risk of being compromised in some certain. So zero trust, building on the previous concepts that we have always had and will carry forward, trust but verify, and then of course supported by the human trusted firewall, right? To make sure that the decisions are made correctly. So I believe if you track all this, you had this whole election security, which I believe is a huge trust issue as well. And on this other end, you have all the endpoints which have to be now moving into a more zero trust model, so that you can trust where you are getting the information for, because you started from a very high barrier, right? And then let endpoints and people and applications get connected. Any other observations? Any specific sectors anybody has? Leon? Okay, I think this was a good warm up towards Jim's presentation. I think, Jim, if you are ready, we can transfer over to your part of the session.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Val. I'm ready. Yeah, thanks for teeing up the concept of zero trust, and also the security in multi-cloud environments, right? So those are, I will definitely touch on those two areas. Can you hear me? Am I coming through okay? Can you hear me all right?
Yes, you're coming good.
Okay, great. So before I kick off here, I just want to introduce, I've got Ed Murphy on the call with me as well. He's account manager for CloudKnox. And Ashley Scholler is, she runs marketing. So she'll be monitoring the chat window or the Q&A session. So please feel free to ask any questions, or make this as interactive as possible. So talking about CloudKnox and kind of the things that we're focused on is really protecting your cloud infrastructure from the new #1 threat, excessive permissions, right? Or also known as zero trust, or the principle of least privilege. So this is really the area where CloudKnox is focused, and many other security vendors in the space. And when we talk about modern cloud infrastructures, right? The new normal as far as compute goes, right? Everyone's moving their infrastructure to the cloud. Everyone's building infrastructure in the cloud. They're automating infrastructure in the cloud. It has helped organizations move quickly and turn up infrastructure quickly, but it has also created a new attack surface, right? Which we call excessive permissions. So if you look at AWS, Azure, GCP, even VMware or vCenter for hybrid cloud environments, if you start to total up all the permissions that are available across those clouds, it's excessive. It's in the 40,000 plus range, right? And what we found that over 50% of those excessive permissions are high risk, right? They could cause catastrophic damage in the infrastructure. They have the ability to disrupt service, delete infrastructure, create unwanted infrastructure, exfiltrate data, right? So there are tons of things that these excessive permissions can do. Oops, sorry about that. Like I said, 95% of them can have an adverse effect on the infrastructure. And their identities that are human identities as well as machine identities, right? Container identities, serverless identities, any roles that are attached to compute instance, access keys. So all of these identities within your infrastructures are over provisioned, and we see that 95% of them can have an adverse effect. We also see that of the permissions that are granted versus the permissions that are used, less than 10% of them are used, right? So in many of what we call risk assessment, and many of the risk assessments that CloudKnox does, we find that that number is even lower. It's closer to 1% of the permissions that are granted to an identity are actually used. This is a dangerous delta. We call this the cloud permissions gap, right? The permissions granted versus permissions used. And it really opens up the infrastructure for misuse, right? Data exfiltration, hacking opportunities, the ability to come in and take control of your infrastructure. Slight product pitch, right? This is what CloudKnox was created to address, but this is a problem in the infrastructure that has existed for a long time, right? And the reason that it's a problem, right, is just impossible to manage manually, right? A lot of organizations know that they have multiple cloud infrastructures, multiple vCenter instances. It's no longer just one AWS account or one Azure subscription or one Google project, right? So we've got customers that are in the thousands of accounts, thousands of subscriptions. So it starts to become very difficult to manage, right? And they just don't have the protocols and processes in place to properly manage and assign all of these permissions across machine and human identities. There are tons of different workloads, right? So you've got databases and storage buckets and compute instances, firewalls. You have to manage all the different types of infrastructure within there. And then there are disparate authorization systems, right? You've got pings and Okta and Active Directory. So there are multiple touch points for these identities to be managed. Exponential growth of non-human identities, right? So within 5 years, we predict that the number of non-human identities the ratio of non-human identities to human identities will grow to about 20-1, right? So it's no surprise that organizations are struggling with this. You've got some legacy frameworks like RBAC out there that really try to don't adapt well to cloud in the aspect that they're really assigning predefined roles with predefined permissions, right? So you're not exactly assigning the permissions that are needed at the time that they're needed. So that's really the problem with RBAC. There's also a lack of visibility, right? You just don't know what permissions are being used, right? You don't know which roles were assigned, of the permissions that were assigned within those roles, which are being used. So we can need to take a deeper look into the permissions that are being used by a particular identity. The next step, right, is to, once you've determined what's going on, right, what permissions are used, how do you right size that? How do you move towards that principle of least privilege or zero trust model, right? You've identified the permissions that are being used out there. Now we need to apply them to this zero trust type model. It's complex, right? And it's not limited to just the cloud environment, right? It's also in hybrid cloud and in your VMware infrastructures as well. Any questions coming on that yet?
No, keep going.
Okay, all right, we'll keep going. So this is really the basis on where CloudKnox was founded, right? So permissions management at the cloud layer isn't broken. It doesn't exist, right? There were no capabilities in the marketplace to be able to look at the permissions being used across an infrastructure. So this is really where we got our start back in 2016. So we built the platform to address this problem. We spent about a year or so in stealth, and then started selling product in 2018. But really, this was the mission of how CloudKnox got started, and really the problem that we set out to solve. We also started looking at, the traditional sort of kill chain analysis, or, the cyber kill chain, right? And we applied that to cloud infrastructure, right? So when you start to look at a typical attack, it goes through this chain where hackers doing recon, looking for that cloud misconfiguration, right? What are the open security ports in your security groups? Are there any keys that have been published out to GitHub? Just doing that reconnaissance work of how to break into the infrastructure. Once you've quote unquote got into the inside, right, and you've infiltrated the infrastructure, then they'll start looking for permissions or resources with excessive identity permissions, right? So that's kind of step 2 in the chain. Once you've identified a role that's over provisioned, then you start to either try to escalate your privilege within that particular AWS account or Azure subscription, or you start to do some lateral movement, right? So let me role chain or do a cross account access and move laterally across different subscriptions or accounts within the cloud infrastructure. And then really the last thing, right, is exfiltration, right? So you think about, copying databases or exfiltrating data out of S3 buckets, making complete snapshots of sensitive infrastructure. So that's kind of the final point in the new kill chain. You break the chain at any point, right? You stop the attack. And really, CloudKnox was designed to look at each one of these components, right? Each area of this kill chain analysis, CloudKnox can provide details on what's going on at each point. So it's really giving you a complete visibility as well as automation to help sort of break this down automatically to prevent attacks within your infrastructure. Well-known breach happened about a year and a half ago, maybe. Just recently announced that they had to pay some substantial fines. Is exactly what I've been describing. So you had a hacker on the outside, right? Was able to overrun a WAF or firewall and assume the role that was assigned to that firewall, right? That WAF role that was assigned to an EC2 instance. That was over provisioned, right? It had read, write, full S3 full access capabilities to all of the buckets within that financial organization's infrastructure. Hacker was able to go through, scan through all of the buckets in the infrastructure, and ultimately, downloaded 100 million plus customer records. And so this is where a principle of least privilege or a zero trust policy would have helped to prevent this attack, right? Even though they probably would have got into the EC2 instances through the WAF, at that point, that WAF would have had a limited role and not been able to access all of the data that it did. Stephen Schmidt, the CISO of AWS, right, had to testify on this. And here's a very powerful quote from him, right? Even if a customer misconfigures a resource, if the customer properly implements least privilege policy, there's relatively little an actor has access to once they are authenticated, right? Significantly diminishing the risk. So even though if you were able to break into the infrastructure, then as long as there's a least privilege policy, they're significantly limited from that lateral movement, being able to roll chain through the environment, being able to access every data store within the environment. So really the principle of least privilege or zero trust model, right, is the way that organizations are going. And getting there, you need tools and platforms that provide that visibility into what actions are being taken and during normal business activities, so that you can monitor and also take automated action against any type of anomalies, or start to build out the right size policy for each user, for each identity. There are several use cases, right? Someone on the call mentioned, sort of DevSecOps and, security operations, building out of infrastructure. At which point in the different departments or organizations or teams within an organization do you start to take action on identities? Right, here are some examples of where least privilege would fit into a cloud infrastructure operations, right? So we start to look at, what's going on in the infrastructure, right? Start to monitor sensitive data, start to control the access to sensitive data, start to manage permissions of identities and resources in multiple clouds, right? As we mentioned, it's not just AWS anymore, right? So there's multiple and hybrid cloud environments. So cloud infrastructure teams are having to manage access across all of this infrastructure. You've talked with your security and compliance teams, right? They're really about automation, automated assessment, building out compliance reports like the CIS benchmarks or PCI, NIST, et cetera. And they also want infrastructure response, right? So integrating into SIM tools or your SOAR tools, as well as automation type frameworks to auto remediate open identities and open policies. The identity and access management teams, right, are really the ones that are going to start building the least privilege policies, right? Stop handing out those super identity type roles. Stop making, as many admins out there that don't need to be, right? And do this on a continuous basis, right? Make sure that your super admins that are out there, what permissions they're using, let's roll that back. And then if they do need to be a super admin at some point, then we'll give them that permission on demand or just in time type permission so that they can manage that infrastructure without having to be a super admin at all times. And then for developers, right? Generally in a development environment, you'll see that developers just get full administrative type roles. Really that's where it begins, right? To start to right size within a development or a staging environment, then you can start to build those boundary permissions or those least privilege permissions within development, move that gradually into a staging and then into a production environment. I think this may be the last slide. Val, any question, or Ashley, any questions coming in so far?
Nope, none that have come through.
Okay, great. So when you think about identity security and kind of the components of identity security, right? There's sort of authentication, right? Putting in your password, multi-factor authentication, biometrics, you name it, just sort of identifying who you are to open the door, right? And that's where most of the PIM and PAM solutions will fit in. And then access controls, right? Pulling passwords from a vaulting system, or sort of assigning roles based on predefined roles, right? So that's sort of the first half. And what we've been talking about, or what I've been talking about, is the authorization, right? Level 3, enforcing the principle of least privilege, enforcing zero trust, right? Really managing that identity in the cloud, not only from a human perspective, but from a non-human perspective as well, right? And this really helps protect against stolen credentials, operator error, malicious attacks, and what all of your machine identities are doing. Think that's it for what I had for slide presentation, right? Thanks everyone for their time today. I know I went through that kind of quickly, so open for questions, or Val, I guess I can pass it back to you.
Sure. I have a few questions following what you presented, and if you can, right? And I think from a SaaS model, and as we're growing from on-prem to a more cloud-oriented environment, how do you expect that the legacy or infrastructure to be secured through your or similar solutions?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, right? And it's kind of that legacy RBAC model is dead, right? That's one of the things we like to say. So you have to look at the cloud and the identity management of your cloud infrastructure as a new opportunity, right? So we see customers that are kind of all over the road, not all over the board on their cloud journey, right? Folks that are just getting started, folks that have been in AWS for 10 years, right? All in on cloud, partially in on cloud. So the organizations that do it properly are ones that are not taking all of they're not doing a lift and shift of their identity practices from on-premise, right? They're looking at cloud and the identities, the information that they have in their cloud infrastructure as new opportunity to right size, right? To move closer to that zero trust model, or that principle of least privilege.
Well, thank you for that answer. I have a question or observation from one of our attendees here, Krupesh. Let me unmute Krupesh. Maybe he can okay. Share a little bit more. Krupesh. Okay. If you have a question, you can unmute yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Will, for the opportunity. And thanks, guys. This is an excellent presentation. I had a quick question, right? So as just, piggybacking on Will's question about as we extend, and then the highly hybrid capabilities that are extending beyond your traditional infrastructure into cloud and SaaS offerings on some of the pointed solutions, which have become very popular for human resource management and Salesforce, and for sales teams and whatnot, not naming any names, but how about extending those capabilities into the infrastructure, or what kind of partnerships do you have to give that insight? Of course, that support services model and the RACI changes, but if somebody wants to see that capability, how do you envision that happening?
Yeah, folks, and Ed, maybe if you want to come, if Ed's still there, you can come off mute and talk a little bit, about some of the customers we've spoken with. We see a lot of, integration opportunities with Splunk and, ServiceNow and Jira, and just helping with the automation of this least privilege concept. We've also provided APIs so that, if you wanted to, not have another, platform that you needed to log into, you can query CloudKnox platform via API to build out these least privilege policies and publish them. So we provide some automation capabilities to be able to integrate with tools that customers already have, or kind of provide this build your own strategy as well. Is that did that answer your question?
It does. It
okay.
does. Any specific integrations that you have been working on the SaaS providers
Well, mainly with automation and sim type tools are the ones that we work on, right? So we've got integration with in ITSM tools as well, like ServiceNow or Jira. We've got a partnership with Splunk. We're working with SailPoints and Savience of the world. So yeah, several integration partners that CloudKnox works with.
All right, thank you. That answers my question.
Okay.
All right.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks for
All
the
right.
question.
Any other questions? Let's give it a minute. I think it's about.
It's Melissa. I did have a question. One of your use cases, it talks about security and compliance, and obviously that's a big thing these days. What have you seen in your use case? You mentioned the automation piece. What have you seen as far as the automation monitoring and assessment and auditing for the misconfiguration and the compliance area, and as far as having maybe the pre-built tools or?
Yeah, so we've seen quite a bit there, right? And as you know, most of the compliance frameworks are industry specific, right? So it depends on what industry you're talking with for, you know, health, high trust, or HIPAA, and, you know, PCI, things like that. What I've seen is most organizations, right, depending on their maturity in the cloud, we'll start with the CIS benchmark, right? So the sort of security 101 of your infrastructure. And let's start to address all of the basics that are available within the security benchmarks or CIS benchmark checks. And then, you know, we'll move deeper into security or compliance frameworks specific to our organization. But yeah, there's really that sort of, you know, crawl, walk, run, whatever you want to talk, you know, however you want to describe it, right? Is let's take care of sort of the easy, you know, are my S3 buckets encrypted, right? Do I have my security groups locked down? You know, am I using strong passwords and multi-factor authentication? So that's really where folks start, and then they'll move next into the industry specific frameworks.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, all right. I think that was a pretty good informative session, Jim. Thanks to the CloudKnox team for making this happen. I think we're at the top of the hour. People probably have to go back to their meetings, but this was very good coming back together. This session is going to be available online. It's on YouTube, and the recording also is going to be online. So please feel free to share with your community. I know nowadays it's like back-to-back Zoom sessions for everyone. So it's hard to get to all of them, but this will be interesting, you know, as we go forward and have our subsequent meetings. But thank you again for joining us. Have a good rest of the afternoon, and take care. We'll see you all.